受け継がれゆく意志、時代のうねり、人の夢。人々が自由の答えを求める限り、それらは決してとどまることはない。
This video is a follow-up to my previous video from a few years ago, Why Nika Works. Please forgive the rough audio from the old one, it took me a while to refine my setup. This new video was made because A, it's been a few years and more manga has happened, including a lot more to do with Nika, and B, I remade that video into an anime convention panel pitched to Anime USA 2024 in Arlington, Virginia. Come check it out if I get selected. I'm left below, let's roll the drums of liberation and get started. With a brief warning that just like the last video, this is a whole series and up-to-the-moment spoilers for the One Piece manga. Anime only and neophytes beware. That opening clip I played earlier invokes Gold Roger's last words regarding inherited will, part of his speech that sets off the great age of piracy and sets the stage for the main plot of One Piece, the quest for the eponymous treasure and to be king of the pirates. In that speech, he was passing on his will to the crowd who'd gathered before his execution, many of them pirates themselves. The speech laid out his vision for what piracy means, an act of seeking liberation and really committing to your dreams. His will was inherited by that crowd, and then by the entire pirating world, and then Roger was executed. The inherited part of inherited will is played somewhat loosely throughout One Piece. At times you get inheritance in the traditional sense, that is, coming from a previous generation who's retired from active duty in their field, or who's died. But then in other cases the inheritance is more an inspiration and emulation of someone who's still alive and active in their field. To stick just to the Straw Hat crew, Luffy's inherited a few sets of wills, inspired by Roger, who is dead, as well as Shanks, who's alive and active, Sabo, who he thought was dead for over a decade, Ace, whose footsteps he followed in but later died, and now Joy Boy, though we're learning more and more details about Joy Boy at this very moment. So you see a mix of near-peer older brother figures, mentors, and legends near and distant. Zoro carries on the dream of his peer Kuina, who died quite pointlessly from falling down the stairs. Nami carries the will of her adoptive mother Belmere, who died to protect her two daughters. Usopp is trying to live up to his father, though it's unclear whether this is a case of, inherited will directly, or more that he's living up to the ideal of his father, and I'm on the team that says Usopp is the biggest deadbeat dad in the series. Even friggin' Kaido was there for his kid, to a degree. Sanji takes his will from his mother, who is the only source of compassion in his screwed-up early childhood, as well as his mentor figure Zeph, who was active as a cook but inactive as a pirate, and passed on his will for both to Sanji in some measure. Chopper gets his will from Dr. Hiriluk, who blew himself up trying to take down the Drum Kingdom's tyrannical king and was a wide-eyed dreamer, if not necessarily a particularly good doctor. Robin picks up the will left behind by her mother and her mother's fellow researchers at Ohara, particularly Professor Clover, as well as the insubordinate Marine Jaguar D. Saul, who she thought was dead, but in one of the most heartwarming moments of the series, was revealed to have survived Aokiji's ice. Frankie takes after Tom the Shipwright, persecuted for making the Oro Jackson, Gold Roger's ship. Brook carries the will of his deceased ex-captain Yorkie, as well as all of the Rumbar pirates, who died after being poisoned and recorded one last song to take to their whale friend Laboon. Jinbei carries the will of Fisher Tiger, the rebel fishman slave who liberated so many from the celestial dragons. But One Piece also plays with the inheritance on a one-to-many basis, the idea that one person's inspirational will can spread across a whole nation or around the world. Gold Roger's famous speech is one, Whitebeard's speech of the One Piece is real is more famous still, if only for the memes.
The One Piece! The One Piece is real!
But then there are cases where this inspirational moment is given for a large crowd and it's not accompanied by the character in question dying. Best recent example is when Momonosuke refuses to submit to Kaido on the live floor at Onigashima even under pain of execution. Momo picked up his father Odin's will, and his moment of defiance helped cement himself as his father's equal, in courage if not in power or ability, and become an inspiration for the samurai of Wano in his own right. But of course Momo's alive and well at the end of it all. The Egghead Arc brings it all together in one go. First, from the fact that Vegapunk posits that devil fruits are an inheritance of the dreams of past humans. That the powers are human imagination made manifest explains in-universe the wide array of wacky paramecia powers versus the somewhat more grounded Zoan and Logia types. Second, the arc brings the two types of inherited will together, all centered on the story of Jewelry, Bonnie, and Bartholomew Kuma. Kuma's backstory gets laid out in the current Egghead Arc, and man oh man is Oda trying to top his own previous tearjerker backstory champions in Law, Brook, and Robin. The bear-like man with the huge frame, it turns out, is descended from a new race of humans called the Buccaneers. At the start of the backstory, the Buccaneers have already been nearly wiped out by the world government through mass enslavement for some unknown past crimes, possibly related to the crimes of Zunisha, the giant elephant, and Joy Boy himself. The Buccaneers pass down the knowledge of the drums of liberation, the rhythm that plays while Luffy is powering up into Gear 5 and is Nika's calling card. They passed it down the form of a song and dance to keep their spirits up through the oppression they faced at the hands of the world government. Kuma himself passed this tradition on to Bonnie before he gave himself up to Vegapunk for cyborgification as a deal to come up with a cure for the crystallization disease that Bonnie inherited from her mother after J. Garcia Saturn was through with her. Bonnie's powers are a kind of artificial devil fruit different from the ones we've seen so far. The malformed creations of the Smiles, or even just the off-color dragon of Momonosuke's copy of Kaido's fruit. Her powers are a product of the experiments done on her and Ginny, but still have the properties of a devil fruit. Her basic power, as introduced in the Shabadi arc, allowed her to turn herself or others into older or younger versions of themselves, fighting by making her opponents into feeble geezers or crying infants, able to disguise herself by becoming a child or an old lady at will. But this arc introduces more advanced versions of her powers, first in a subtle way when she uses her powers to rust a door lock into dust, and then more fanciful powers in the present and in a flashback where she blows up, and I mean embiggens in the Miss Marvel way, not explodes in the Gladius or Mr. Five way, her body parts because she imagined a future where she was a giant. Her imagined future powers tie into the nature of devil fruits themselves per Vegapunk's theorizing. The more possibilities she believes in, the crazier possible futures she's able to unlock, and in so doing mimic the abilities of other races or even other devil fruits. But when he was trying to kill her, Saint Saturn mocked her by saying that as she grew into adolescence, her powers weaken because she loses that ability to imagine infinite futures and truly believe in them. Outside of the context of this arc, that would seem pretty corny, very Peter Pan belief equals magic and all, but in the context of the arc, showing more about the nature of devil fruits, this idea lands very powerfully. It follows up first from how Kaido explained awakening to Luffy, that your body and mind need to catch up to your powers to grow them, as well as Vegapunk's theory that devil fruits themselves are based on the imagination of the ancients. In the past, Bonnie had briefly been able to imagine a Nika-like future for herself, but finds that she can't when Saint Saturn has her on the ropes, until she witnesses Gear 5 for herself, seeing Luffy fight against the discouraging force of Saint Saturn and the other Gorosei inspires her, and she is able to once again imagine a future where she becomes Nika. At least for a few moments. The main thrust of my last video still holds true. Will is an essential force in One Piece, but that will still needs to be matched up by physical power, and at the end of the day, Bonnie's just a 12-year-old girl who's only been at sea for 2 years. Yonko-level power is a bit out of her reach, no matter how strong her will or how busted her devil fruit. Seeing Luffy inspire Bonnie is nothing new for One Piece. Like I said before, will can be passed on without the benefactor dying, without it being an inheritance in the truest sense, just like with Luffy and Shanks or Sanji and Zeph. But this also isn't the first time we've seen a devil fruit power involved in passing on inspiration. Enter the revolutionary commander Bello Betty, who uses the pump fruit to pump up her audience into a revolutionary fervor. This time it's not known whether this power is as overwhelming as like Tama's Kibi Dango was to the gifters during the Wano arc, or if it's a bit more like Conqueror's Haki and only works on people somewhat receptive to it. But it shows how an infectious will to fight for freedom gets woven into the magic of One Piece itself. She builds the power of the Revolutionary Army from the bottom up, using her power so that the revolution can spread beyond Dragon's own enlisted followers. And this leads me to my own harebrained theory about where the story might go from here. Bonnie first learned about Nika from her father, who learned of it from his father and on down the Buccaneer line. She then saw Nika in person and was inspired to become Nika like herself, but we know that her powers can also be used on other people. My bet is that she's going to become a Turbo Bello Betty at some point, transforming a number of characters, perhaps a whole crowd or whole army, into Nika-like forms as well, and that this will be a critical moment in the fight against the world government, especially as the full scope of their evil has been revealed. The thematic significance of Nika that I pointed out in my last video has only gotten stronger with the passing of another arc, though the fascinating thing is that this growth didn't come from Luffy himself. I mean, he's still just tooling around with Gear 5, though coming up with crazier and crazier stunts. Instead, the growth came from expanding the background of Nika and his significance to Kuma's people, as well as through Jewelry Bonnie. I can't wait to see what Bonnie will do with her newfound powers, and what more we'll learn of Devil Fruits and the inherited will of Joy Boy and his contemporaries from the Ancient Kingdom. Peace. Thank you all for watching. Give me a like and subscribe if you enjoyed it. Planning on stepping up my pace of videos after a slow year. Though the next 2 months are time to focus on the US elections, so see you on the other side of that.